Hey everyone, I'm Darren, and this is Grey Heat Photography. So if you're new here, welcome to Grey Heat Photography, welcome to my channel. So this is going to be a review of the Nikon Z5, my thoughts on it, why I chose it, and what I think of its performance so far. So let's get into it. So, a little bit of backstory on myself. For those that may or may not know me, my photography journey as a professional photographer started, well, not professional, but as a photographer, started in the year 2009, 2010. My wife bought me a camera and I just love photography. Eventually, of course, by the year 2012, I got into wedding photography full-time after the prompting of a few friends and my wife and also another photographer. And I started off using a Nikon D3100, sorry. So, why did I choose that camera? Why did I not go Canon? So most people ask me, how come I didn't go Canon? Well, at that point in time, if you remember, the Nikon D3100, for those of us who are photographers, was a red camera. I just thought it was so nice and cute and it looked really nice. It just looks really nice and shiny. You know, a lot of us are attracted to shiny things. And eventually, that went from one to the next. So I started off in 2009 my photographic journey with a Fuji S700. I still have that somewhere in my arsenal, somewhere about in all the rest of cameras I have, or somewhere in between there. Then I upgraded to the Nikon D3100. Then eventually I bought a new Nikon D7000 camera. Then I backed that up with another D7000. Started to buy different glass, 70-200, 28-75, 51.4, 85, the the Tokina 16-28, and quite a few other lenses, even a few macro lenses. Of course, time would have it that mirrorless came around. So I started with Nikon D7000, added that to my arsenal. Sold my D7000, upgraded to a Nikon D750, so I was shooting with a D750. And I felt it was a bit weird having a D750, you know, along with a D7000. So a friend of mine, they were selling a Nikon D600. So I eventually bought the D600 and I kept the D7000. So my wife, she was shooting on the D7000 for events. I was using the D750 and the D600. Recently, however, with the whole mirrorless craze, I decided to go mirrorless. And what are my thoughts on it? So, I have decided to go mirrorless and also at the same time cut down my size, the size of my gear. As one is getting older, as I'm getting a bit older, not that I'm old, I'm deciding I think I probably need less gear. So at one time, I remember we used to have 2 bags of gear, one rolling bag, one handbag, and it was kind of difficult to get onto airplanes. Now, at that point in time, we were doing a lot of weddings. We still do quite a few weddings, but with the pandemic, it has slowed down a bit. But that's okay because I am also a teacher, so teaching occupies my full day and I do weddings on a weekend. And I decided, okay, mirrorless has come along, so time to cut my kit down. I eventually decided to, should I go or stay with Nikon, or should I jump ship and go to Sony? Some people ask me why not Canon. Just a joke, I've never been that drunk to go to Canon. Just joking. But I have always loved Nikon's files. So I looked at different systems. I looked at Sony and what would happen, how much I would have to invest to totally switch systems. It would mean I would have to change triggers, change lenses, and change a lot of different things, change a lot of things in my workflow. Then when Nikon launched their Z6, which I'm filming on right now, it didn't interest me. Yes, it's a beautiful camera. It still is a beautiful camera even in 2022. However, I couldn't ignore the elephant in the room, which was the single memory card slot, even if it's CF Express. Probably later on, I may buy a Z6 used, because you can get a Z6 used for like $1,000 to $1,200 US right now in good condition. Some of them use like new. However, that probably may be the one that my wife may be using as a backup or as a second shooter. So I couldn't quite ignore the elephant in the room. And so when it came time to pull the trigger, I decided to go back Nikon, with the understanding that the Z9 was coming, and if the Z9 came, then other things would slowly trickle down, or would trickle down within a year or two. And because of that, eventually Nikon would release probably a Z6 version 3, a Z7 version 3 with that particular algorithm. In any case, I eventually settled upon the Nikon Z5. So when I looked at it, I decided, okay, Z6, Z5, which one should I go? Z6 was 100 or 200 US more. Z5 was around 1100 US new at that point in time. So which one should I go with? As I said earlier, the elephant in the room was the single memory card slot. So I pulled the trigger and decided, let's go with a Z5. And from there, we will see. So I'm presently doing weddings with the Nikon Z5, which I have here. And my trusty D750. Now, I love this camera. It is, however, sold. So after my wedding this weekend, it will no longer belong to me. It has served me through 82,000 pictures, 5 years from 2015. Oh, that's more than 5 years. Close to 7 years from 2015, 2016 to now. So this camera and I, we have seen a lot of action. We have seen local weddings, foreign weddings, and we have shot quite a lot. So this camera is my go-to low light performing beast. So I wanted to get something that would compare in terms of pictures to the D750. Now, I'm not much of a video shooter. However, I am starting to get a bit more into video. So I decided, let's test the waters. And so I bought this, with the expectation that Nikon said it was their entry level into the full frame mirrorless segment. I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. Nikon lied about this camera. In my personal take, I believe that this camera is a potential wolf in sheep's clothing. Here's why. 2 memory card slots, which you cannot go wrong with, right? And that would take a new format of memory cards, UHS Type 2, great, which allows you to take pictures and also videos simultaneously. I have done a lot of that since I've gotten this camera for the past 2 to 3 months. So I'll be shooting pictures and instantly switch from picture to video without any lag. The buffer is amazing, really, really amazing. The autofocus performance is good, could be a little bit better in some areas. However, any photographer, once they understand their equipment, they know how to work with it and work around it. So what I have done with my camera is that I have programmed my function 2 button to autofocus mode, and I have programmed my function 1 button to tracking, to object tracking. So if at any one point in time the camera decides to focus on something that I don't want it to focus on, for example, a really bright background, it's very easy for me to press this in like half of a second or less, pull up object tracking, place it over my subject, hold on my autofocus, and I'm good to go. And that literally takes me a fraction of a second to go from here to here quickly. So as I said, I think the Z5 was a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I've done quite a few images with this, a wedding, probably a good few more before the end of this year. So what are my thoughts? The Nikon Z5 is squarely aimed at people like myself, and I personally consider it an upgrade or a lateral move, mirrorless. So if you're coming from a Z750, this is a lateral move straight across from mirrorless. The handling is very similar to what you would expect from a D750 performance. Shutters or the amount of images per second, it's a little bit slower, so the frame rate is a little bit slower. However, in my case, I shoot slowly. I am not like so many photographers or some photographers who shoot 1001 images and then edit or go searching. It's not my style, right? So with that said, what do I like about the Z5? Autofocus. Yes, before I know some of you all jump on me and say, you know, Sony has the best autofocus, or Nikon. Remember, I'm coming from a D750 with that little sanitary napkin autofocus system in the middle. Now I have autofocus edge to edge, and it works really well, especially if I'm using single point or select point focus. Many times the camera works well enough where I just leave it in continuous autofocus, and the eye tracking and face tracking works beautifully. It works as it's supposed to work. It does its job. In the rare event that it doesn't, I quickly switch to tracking in a split second, in the blink of an eye. Situations where I've found that it doesn't want to focus would be on subjects who have very, very dark skin. So one day we were at home and I was trying it out with one of my relatives, and I realized the Z5 would focus on everyone else except for one relative of mine who is a bit darker than everyone else, and it would not find his eye. It found everyone else's eye, but it just would not find his eye. So I had to just pull up object tracking really quickly. Other than that, object tracking is sticky, it stays, it follows subjects. Even if the box does not move with them, I know it's there. What's the disadvantage of getting this over a Z6? Well, the Z6 has 1080 4K at 30 frames per second, and that's full frame. That's not cropped, that's full frame. However, when I consider it, the Z5 also has 1080, always cropped. And also the Z6 has 120. So if you like to slow down things a lot, of course, the Z6 is a better way to go. However, for the kind of things for the price that Nikon has positioned this particular camera with, and the few things that they have left out compared to the Z6, I think that this camera, the Z5, is really a steal of a deal. The images are sharp and beautiful. The autofocus is quick. Video specs could be better. Hopefully in the next year or two, when Nikon drops the Z5 version 2, if they do, I'll probably consider it. Some people have a problem with the top LCD missing. It's not an issue for me, because my eyes rarely ever leave my camera. I love the ability to be able to send images straight from my camera to my phone so that clients can see it. I wish, however, that Nikon would build build in some ability in the Nikon app to transfer raw images while I'm shooting in the background seamlessly to my phone. That gives me extra backup, which I would be happy with, right? If they did that, then I probably would have no problem choosing a Z5. Presently, I'm buying another Z camera next week. I'm still torn between the Z6 or another Z5, probably because I may consider getting a Z6 for video purposes only. But when I look at it, for me, as a wedding and portrait photographer, the Z5 is perfect for my needs. Colors are on point, not edited, straight out of camera. Colors are on point. Sometimes I rarely have to do anything with an image to get it the way I want it to look. Out of camera, straight out of camera, it is perfect. Dynamic range is good. However, I think highlight tuning could be a little better on the highlights. Shadow recovery is perfectly fine if you're coming from a D750. Shadow recovery is very good. High ISO performance is good. Low light performance and low light tracking is good. Better than a lot. And, well, at least for me, at weddings, because all of my glass is either 2 or 1.4, because I stopped using zooms. I really don't like how zooms look. So I kind of downsized my whole kit. So I now own a 50 1.4 and 85 1.4, a Sigma 24 to 35 f2, and I'll probably, to round out everything, get a Sigma 135 1.8 or a Sigma 105 1.4. And those are my 4 wedding lenses right there. So rarely at a wedding do I ever cross 3200. It's very, very rare for me to ever cross 3200 at any wedding venue. It's very rare. So even up at 3200, 6400, I am comfortable with the images that the camera produces. I went to a wedding where I was a guest and no flash, and at ISO 2500, ISO 2400, those areas there, 2000, images were perfectly fine for me, even in JPEG. So, my takeaway: if you are into stills photography, portraits, weddings, babies, those type of events, things that move not so quickly, then the Z5 may be a perfect camera for you. If you are into video, heavily into video, then the Z5 is not necessarily the best camera you may want to get. It has some pretty decent video features such as 1080-60, which you can do a lot with if you know how to work with it. If you're a bit of a hybrid shooter, such as I am, so I'm transitioning from being stills only to more of a portrait and hybrid shooter, then it can serve as a pretty decent camera. If, however, you're a sports photographer, wildlife, anything where the action is moving really, really quickly, then the Z5 is not for you. However, for the price point, I have no problems recommending this, especially if you have a lot of Nikon Z glass lying around. Not D, sorry. If you have a lot of older Nikon D glass lying around, or even Sigma, some of these Sigma art lenses or those art lines, I have no issue recommending this camera. And presently at 1100 US used like new, or 1300 US new, whichever one. Sometimes you can find one in really good condition for 1000 US. Even right now the Z6 is on sale for 1000 US. This is really, really compelling compared to the D750. Oh, also, my D750, when I compare it size-wise, is a lot bigger. So there is a video where I've shot the D750, the Z5 and Z6 side by side, and you will see that the Z5 and Z6 are basically or almost identical to each other, with the exception of the top LCD screen and the mode dial, that locking mode dial. I really love the fact that this mode dial does not lock, so that means I don't have to worry about unlocking it when I'm dealing with something at a wedding. I can just keep my eye up to the camera, change modes with one finger, and not have to worry about unlocking it. So that was really good. I know some people prefer the locking dial. That is not an issue for me. The top LCD plate is not an issue. The LCD plate on the Z6 is small anyhow, so it's not an issue. The viewfinder is the same thing as the Z6. The screen on the back of the Z5, however, has a lower resolution than the Z6, but in a situation you really don't notice it. It is a bit noticeable. It is a little bit noticeable. I had the D600, and I noticed apparently the drop in resolution compared to the D600. The D600, I think, was a camera that got a lot of bad rep because of that whole oil on the sensor issue. Luckily for me, I got one that did not have that issue, and it gave me beautiful images that were truly wonderful. So my D750 has won me photography competitions. My D600 has gotten me close enough to winning and has produced stunning wedding images, and I expect that my Z5 will do the same. But then, of course, as I always tell new photographers coming into this business, the camera is only an extension of the person who is holding it. A ball in Michael Jordan's hand, for those of us who are old enough and remember the good old days, not LeBron, he's just meh, the good old days of Michael Jordan, the greatest of all time, will understand that a basketball in Jordan's hand will still win a game. So a Z5 or a Z6 or a Z6 II, doesn't matter which camera it is, once the photographer knows how to handle his stuff, then it really makes no difference what he is using, because he can still create and get the job done. Would I trust this? Do I trust this for a wedding? 100% yes. Do I trust the Z6 to a wedding? Although it's using CF Express, I am not totally sure. I have between now and next week when I order to figure out if I trust it still. Autofocus performance wise, the Z6 and Z5, I have tested them side by side and they are pretty close. It would be like splitting hairs. It would be like saying tomato and tomato. Same processor, same autofocus system. I've tested them in low light and they both acquire the eyes pretty well. They both stick to the subject, especially with the new updates. I'm hoping Nikon continues to bring updates to these cameras to make them better. There must be some form of trickery that they can do. But Nikon, please, if you ever get a chance to see this, please build in RAW support into the SnapBridge program so that people who have like Z6 or other cameras, we can easily back up RAW files. We can easily back up RAW files to our cameras while we are shooting. Anyhow, that's enough of me rambling. I'm Darren. This is Grey Heat Photography, and we are out, everyone. Bye.